Hey peeps, hope you're doing well. Hello, welcome back, all that jazz. I'm going to get right into it. Many of you have told me that John Carpenter is your favorite director, and he's definitely directed and written and composed music for some of my favorite movies of all time. That is for damn sure. So I thought I'm going to make a video where I talk about or rank my John Carpenter movies. And let's just get into it. Now, I know that people are going to disagree with this. I understand that. Just understand that yourself. When you go into this, understand that this is an opinion. Obviously, your opinions are going to differ from mine. I would love to hear someone out there though who might agree with every one of my picks here. That would be fucking amazing if there was actually somebody out there who agreed with my every rank here, but I highly doubt that's going to be the case. But it's Halloween. Halloween is just over a week away, and it's time to talk about John Carpenter, man. The dude, the man when it comes to horror movies. There are a couple, I mean, Alfred Hitchcock, obviously. Come on. Technically, he might be the man, but Carpenter's right there too, in terms of horror. Hitchcock did a lot of other things, and Carpenter's done some other things too, and I think he did them well. He's not only ever made horror movies, so anyway, obviously here he is, the man. We love John Carpenter. What a cool. This guy just seems like a genuinely cool guy too. His interests, I love that he's going on tour with his kids, with his music, and he loves video games, and he's made some classic movies, and he just seems like the kind of guy you'd want to hang out with, you know? Hang out, sit down, get stoned with, play some video games, watch a movie or two. He's just that kind of guy. Sit down and hang out with this dude, you know? John Carpenter. I'm not going to get into who he is. You already know who he is, and if you don't know who he is, why would you even find this video? I don't even know. So, there is the intro. Now, there are 18 movies in total, and I'm going to rank every damn one of them. And if I lose count, sorry, but I might lose numeric count as I go. But I've pulled up all of the tabs, as you can probably see. Look at this mess of tabs right here. It's a total mess. But I'm showing these tabs rather than showing the actual movies because, to be honest with you, I don't even own some of these movies, the physical copies at least. So I just thought I'm going to pull them all up on Wikipedia and we can look at those because that's all most YouTubers do anyway. They just mumble about Wikipedia, so why not just show it? So, number 18 obviously is this, The Ward. Now, I've only seen this once. Didn't do a damn thing for me, man. Maybe I should see it again. And this is his last movie. You're going to see a theme here too, in terms of John Carpenter movies and where I rank them. I'm definitely, as I was compiling my list and putting it all in order, I noticed that I was basically going backwards. I was starting with his most recent stuff and going back to some early stuff. I don't think his recent stuff is all that at all. I'm pretty indifferent about it. By the way, too, I'm talking about movies that John Carpenter has directed, okay? Don't get super nerdy and OCD on me, people. Movies that he's directed. I'm not including movies that he's produced, or he's just written, or he's, I don't know, executive produced, or whatever. I'm not counting anything he's done for TV either. All right? You're not going to see Elvis on this list. These are movies. Theatrical movies only. I'm not including TV things, body bags, Tales from the Crypt type things like. I'm not including that. Theatrical releases that he directed. All right. I just know people are already furiously typing on their keyboards. You asshole! How dare you not include this and that? Theatrical movies he directed, and that's all there is to it. This movie, I don't know. Come on. This is John Carpenter wheezing. You do get to look at Amber Heard. I mean, that's not a bad thing. She's a gorgeous woman, and you do get that. But other than that, this movie's pretty fucking weak, man. I'm sorry. This is not a very good movie. Let's see here. Let's look at this. Didn't make its money back. I think this came out in 2010. Yeah, 2010. There you go. Seems about right. I don't remember where I saw this, how I saw this. 33% review. Yeah, I don't know. By the way, too, when I see review scores, especially when they're derived from Rotten Tomatoes, which I think normally, when you go to Wikipedia, I think they default to the Wikipedia or they default to Rotten Tomatoes. Yeah, it's funny. Like when I see a low grade or a low rating, a low aggregate combined rating of a movie, I might go the other way. I think in recent years, film criticism just isn't what it used to be. I feel like in the old timey days, reviewers were much, much, much better at objectively rating a movie. That doesn't happen anymore. Most film critics and reviewers always have an agenda and they're always checking off their little checklists to make sure that the movie included this and did it include that. And I've rambled about this and ranted about this in past videos, and I'm sure most of you are bored to death with this, but this isn't just an opinion, this is a fact. Film reviewers don't know, by and large, don't know what they're doing anymore. They rate movies based on things in our society that they feel should be checklisted. They're not rating the movie on its own merit. They're rating movies upon based on who the cast is, whether or not those casts are hitting certain benchmarks and checklists. So when I see low aggregate Rotten Tomato scores, I don't necessarily automatically jump to a conclusion that a movie sucks. In fact, I might think the opposite. My opinions on a lot of movies tend to go the other direction. I'll give you a prime example, and I know this is kind of veering off of John Carpenter, but a movie that I absolutely love and adore that's come out in the last 5 years. In fact, I think it came out in 2020. Is a movie called Unhinged. Russell Crowe is in it. I think it's fantastic. I think it's one of the best suspense horror type movies I've seen in a long time, and it got panned for the most part. And the people who panned it were panning it because it didn't have this and it didn't have that and it wasn't this and it wasn't that. But it's funny because that movie is way smarter than most reviewers take it credit for. That movie is taking aim at the very people who hate it. And that is a great microcosm of what I feel is wrong with film criticism these days. I feel like the people who criticize these movies negatively, you can criticize a movie positively, it's possible, but the people who criticize movies like Unhinged negatively are the target of that movie. They don't get it because they're the target. They hate that movie because they don't want to accept that maybe that movie's making fun of them. And by the way, you should go watch Unhinged. If you didn't like it the first time you saw it, go watch it again. That movie's way, way, way smarter than you're giving it credit for. That movie is an absolute riot. It's really funny. You have to have a dark sense of humor, obviously, but it's really funny. It's pretty frightening in ways that a lot of people might not recognize it to be frightening. It's holding a mirror up to current society, really. And in my opinion, Unhinged did that way better than the vast majority of other horror movies I've seen in any recent years. So when I see this rating, anyway, getting back to John Carpenter, when I see this 33%, it makes me feel like I should go watch this movie again. Maybe I'm missing something because I do tend to go the other way when it comes to Rotten Tomatoes. I think the vast majority of film criticism is absolute garbage these days. It's not honest and it's not focusing on the one fucking thing it should be focusing on, entertainment value. Humans that have this holier than thou approach and attitude about themselves seem to think that they're better than evolution. Well, you're not. All of us humans have the same primordial grunting Neanderthal desires as anybody else. So if you're going to pretend that you're above that, you're full of shit and you shouldn't be reviewing movies in the first place. All right. Rant over. The Ward. My least favorite John Carpenter movie. There it is. Now, 17, right? I have Ghosts of Mars at number 17. Right? Come on. I mean, Ice Cube is in this. I like that part. I like that Ice Cube's in this. I always felt like John Carpenter's great about that. Like he put Rowdy Roddy Piper in They Live, and he puts Ice Cube in Ghosts of Mars, and he's not afraid to put these fringe actors, as they are, in his movies because they are super talented. Roddy Piper was a great actor. He was really funny. Ice Cube's a great actor. Ice Cube is insanely talented, man. And in my opinion, he's the greatest rapper of all time, by the way. Maybe that's another video. But Ice Cube is supremely talented. He's a great actor, and I'm glad he put him in this movie. He actually makes the movie much better than it is. I don't think Ghosts of Mars is a very good movie. I think it's kind of, yeah, I got the feeling that John Carpenter, it just wasn't his bag. Like I don't know the full story behind the production of this movie. And he did write it, or he co-wrote it with this Larry Sulkus guy, but not his greatest moment. Let's see how it did. Yeah, it didn't make its money back. What are you gonna do? God, Pam Grier's in this too. That's right. I've only seen this movie once. I didn't love it. But Ice Cube and Pam Grier are in it. I mean, do you need any more reason to go watch this movie? The fact that those two are in it make it immediately watchable. Not my favorite movie. 23%, even lower than The Ward. So there you go. Again, that makes me feel like I need to go watch it again. But like I mentioned before, my least favorite Carpenter movies tend to be his most recent ones. And Ghosts of Mars is not my favorite. I think it has its problems. 16, right? Escape from LA. I feel like people are going to disagree with me on this. This movie is a mess. And man, I was so disappointed when I saw this movie. I saw this movie in the theater at the time. And I mean, obviously, for someone who ranks Escape from New York as their favorite movie of all time, which I do, it was a disappointment, man. A major disappointment. Yeah, August 1996. God, I can't believe it's been that long, but I went and saw this in the theater. This movie literally jumped the shark, man. There's that scene in the movie where Kurt Russell is surfing. It's like, oh my God, it was too much. It was too much. John Carpenter obviously was trying to make a buck with this one. This movie is a real mess, but it is John Carpenter and Kurt Russell, and in that way, it's mega fun. Bruce Campbell's also in it, so that's a plus. But this movie's a mess, man. I'm sorry, but it is. If you love this movie, I would like to hear your reasoning on that. This doesn't work. This movie, like I said, Bruce Campbell, he's kind of the best part of the movie. His very small part that he has. Not a great movie. What is 53%? All right, half and half. Yeah, a movie with a lot of problems. And you need to be careful with movies like this because Escape from New York is one of the greatest movies ever. So when you do a sequel, you want to make sure that it works, and this doesn't work. If you like this, I would like to hear your reasoning for it because, yeah, this movie's a mess. Vampires. Now, I feel like now that those first three are out of the way, was this 15 now, right? Number 15 in the list. I feel like this is like the start of a new tier of John Carpenter movies. I think that this movie gets unfairly maligned. I don't think this movie's bad. I think it's a mess. I don't think it works, but it's still entertaining. That's possible. I mean, I think a lot of great John Carpenter movies are a mess, but they still work. They're still fun. Like there are a couple in the top 5 I was looking at. Like, yeah, this movie's kind of a mess, but it's still fun, you know. Vampires doesn't quite work, but it's still eminently watchable. Every time this movie comes on, I kind of have to stop and watch it. James Woods is great. It's kind of got a patchwork cast there, but I like Vampires. Where would you rank it? I would be surprised if this is anybody's favorite John Carpenter movie, but maybe it is. I don't know. Let's see. This got a 42%. All right. I could see where someone really wouldn't like this movie, but I did think it was entertaining enough to mildly recommend to somebody. I'm not a huge vampire fan either. I kind of felt like, well, I feel like a lot of later John Carpenter movies, he's just kind of making these movies to recognize a certain genre, but he might not have a ton of passion for it, maybe. If you know what I'm trying to say, this is one of those movies. I feel like he made a vampire movie. It's like, how do we get asses in seats? Well, John Carpenter makes a vampire movie. But when you watch the movie, you don't feel a ton of passion coming from the man, John Carpenter. Not a bad movie, far from his best, as you can see. I have this down at number 15. Number 14, I have Village of the Damned. Now, again, I know people love this movie. I think this is kind of corny. I've never really liked this movie. It's okay. It has moments of it has moments of coolness, but for the most part, I just thought it was messy, like an updated Children of the Corn or something. I don't know. Children of the Corn's another one of those movies. I know people love that movie, but I've never been a huge fan. This movie's kind of a mess. Christopher Reeve is in it. That's cool. Kirstie Alley, Mark Hamill, which is cool. Who doesn't love Mark Hamill, by the way? What a career this guy's had. Love that guy. Love that guy. He's ended up being probably the most interesting Star Wars character ever. He's just, yeah, he's a fascinating guy. Not a great movie. Now, again, I have a feeling that a lot of you are going to be offended by this. Like, that's my favorite or one of my favorites. Not for me. At 29%. Yeah, this movie's really a mess. It's really a mess. It's disjointed. It's kind of uninspired. The acting is not great. It's kind of, I don't know. You can tell John Carpenter didn't write it. He didn't write it. Yeah. Let me know if you think I'm wrong, but I don't think I am. It was tough to decide between this one and Vampires, which film went where. I think I like this one a little bit more, but it's close. And then this one would be right behind it. I think In the Mouth of Madness maybe is starting another tier. I think this movie's got plenty to enjoy about it. It's not bad. I think Sam Neill's really good. I do think it's kind of messy. Again, you can tell that John Carpenter didn't write this movie. Just doesn't have that John Carpenter flair to it. But it is kind of cool. It has moments that are very entertaining, but far from his best. Let's see, 60%. Yeah, that seems about right. It seems like 60% of this movie goes right and 40% of it goes wrong. It's just kind of a movie that doesn't always work. But In the Mouth of Madness, there is some stuff to enjoy, but not my favorite. This isn't exactly one of Carpenter's movies that I go out of my way to focus on and watch. I don't know that I will ever be doing a deep dissertation of this movie. It's just not something that I don't know. Like, again, it has moments, but overall, not my favorite. And I know there's somebody out there who's like, "That's his most underrated." Okay, fine. That's your opinion. Go make your video about it. I'm making my video. In the Mouth of Madness is just not my favorite. So where am I here? 18, 17, 16, 15, 14. That was 13. All right, we're on to 12 here. Memoirs of an Invisible Man. Now this is the first one in my list that obviously is not a horror movie. I like this movie. I think it works. I think it's John Carpenter's movies they all hark back to an earlier time in film. I think I've talked about this before, but I think John Carpenter is most inspired by the Western genre. If you look at all of his movies, there's something that you can pick out of history when it comes to the Western genre. All of his movies are kind of steeped in Westerns. All of them. He's a horror guy, I understand that, but his movies are Westerns, really. They're bastardizations of some Western and some Western director and some Western actor somewhere. Every one. I know I'm repeating myself, but you look to, Snake Plissken is Clint Eastwood. Jack Burton from Big Trouble in Little China is John Wayne. Every little thing he's doing in his movies is some kind of hearkening back to a Western somewhere. Memoirs of an Invisible Man is just a kind of his appreciation of Invisible Man, which is a great movie. The old original movie is a great movie. I think this is a pretty good movie. I don't think this got reviewed very well. I am a big Chevy Chase fan. I think Chevy Chase is fantastic. I think he's hilarious. I think he's a great writer. I think he's a very smart man. Love Chevy Chase. Wow, 28%. I think that is extremely harsh. I I enjoy this movie. I think it's pretty good. I think people who might not enjoy this have expectations from John Carpenter. Perhaps I'll have to go read those reviews sometimes, but maybe they thought, well, John Carpenter's not making a horror movie. What's he doing? Well, he's making a different movie. There's nothing wrong with that. I think Memoirs of an Invisible Man is a damn good movie. I think it's pretty good. Is it his best? No, not even close. But I do like it. I think Chevy Chase is cool. I like Daryl Hannah. I think they did have some chemistry in this movie. I think the movie works. I don't think there's a damn thing wrong with this movie. And Sam Neill, again, second time, actually, Mouth of Madness was the second time he worked with Carpenter, but this was the first time. Sam Neill's really good in this movie. Sam Neill and John Carpenter had a way with each other. You could tell that they probably got along personally, and there was a good reason why Carpenter went back to him a couple of times, because he's a very good actor and he is good in John Carpenter movies. Invisible Man, I think, an unrated, not massively, but slightly underrated movie, especially if it's getting rated 28% on Rotten Tomatoes. I don't know. It's not perfect, but I don't think. I mean, how many perfect movies does John Carpenter have? In my opinion, he's got one, and you'll see what it is. And I'm sure it won't take you guys long to figure out what it is. Here we go. Prince of Darkness. Where are we? This is number 11. Okay. Prince of Darkness. I've talked to people who say without a smirk, without a shred of irony, that this is their favorite John Carpenter movie. I've heard it. People who love John Carpenter will state that this is their favorite Carpenter movie. It is not mine, not even gracing the top 10, as you can see. But this is a cool movie. It has moments that are highly enjoyable and kind of freaky. Not kind of, just they are freaky. Alice Cooper's in it. What's not to like about that? Again, Carpenter's kind of pulling. He liked to kind of go outside of the film school and just take someone out of the pure pop culture school and throw it into his movie. And that's what he does with Alice Cooper. He is in this movie. It's a cool concept, but by the end of the movie, like, it's one of those movies where you're watching it, you start watching it, and you're really into it, and you're really into what it's saying and how it's delivering its message and the whole premise of the movie. It's fun, kind of freaky, it's cool. But then as the movie goes, you kind of, at least for me, I lost interest. Like, after the movie had been playing for an hour, I remember kind of being like, okay, I think I'm kind of losing it here. And by the end of the movie, I'm just done. I don't think the movie starts off really well, and I just think it just kind of fizzles out by the end. Not a bad movie. Honestly, he made this kind of toward the tail end of his great movie making in terms of horror in 1987. Not a bad movie. It's pretty good. Donald Pleasence is in it. It's always worth watching when Donald Pleasence is in your movie, and obviously John Carpenter used him several times. Let's see, 63%. Yeah, okay, that sounds about right. It does have a cool soundtrack. I don't think the movie works, but it is a pretty good movie. It's one of those movies you'll put on at night when you're drunk or stoned and you want to watch something that kind of makes you laugh and kind of freaks you out, but isn't all that engaging. That's how I see this movie. Not bad, not great. It just is what it is. All right, number 10, right? We're up to 10. Assault on Precinct 13. Now, this is where we shift up another notch into another realm of John Carpenter movies. I think those first 8 I just talked about, they're kind of, I don't know, they're kind of off to the side a little bit when I think of Carpenter, but there are 10 movies that I feel very strongly about when it comes to John Carpenter, and this is where it starts. I think this is a very cool movie. Assault on Precinct 13. This is a really good movie. It works. Early John Carpenter, as you can see, 1976. They did remake this, right? They redid this, right? A remake. Yeah, okay. I was gonna say, am I losing my mind? Ethan Hawke and Lawrence Fishburne. I've never seen the remake, all right? Never bothered with the remake. As those of you who watch my channel, you've probably gleaned that I am not a big fan of remakes. What is the... I would be surprised if this didn't have a pretty strong reception. Let's see. And I don't see later reception. I'm sure it's been re-evaluated and people probably like it. I don't see any numbers, but this is a damn good movie. It for what it is, it works. It's got a nice flow. It's got great music. The acting's pretty cool. It's the acting is just good enough for the level of B movie greatness that this movie is. I think John Carpenter was definitely he was ramping up his filmmaking abilities because he had done one movie before this one, and I think it's going to be the next one on my list here. In fact, yeah, I can see that it is. But this is when Carpenter kind of started he started coming into his own as a filmmaker. You can see things that he would always use, techniques he'd always use. This is a really good movie. If you've never seen this, it might not be what you're expecting if you are a fan of John Carpenter, if you've somehow never seen this. Not really a horror movie. It's more of a thriller, kind of an action thriller, but it's really good. I would highly recommend you watch this. This is my number 10 John Carpenter movie. Number 9, what I was just talking about, Dark Star. This is the spaced out Odyssey. This is the movie he made at film school with Dan O'Bannon. Now you'll know Dan O'Bannon for writing Alien, for writing and directing The Return of the Living Dead, which I've also done a video on. Dan O'Bannon was his own little industry and a great filmmaker and writer in his own right. Obviously, the guy wrote Alien. Now, if you've watched the Alien documentary, you know a lot of people had their hands all over that screenplay. But Dan O'Bannon came up with the gist and the storyline of Alien, and we all love Alien. So Dark Star is a fun fucking movie, man. This movie, maybe some people think it hasn't aged all that well. I think it has aged pretty well in the terms of the fact that it's a 50-year-old movie, it's a student film, and it is very well done in that kind of environment. I mean, it's 50 years old. The guy was a student. And when you think of it that way, you can see all of the kinds of things that it was cementing in terms of how John Carpenter was to direct his movies in future years. It's not a perfect movie. It's super low budge, but it's really funny. I wouldn't say it's scary, but it's very atmospheric. It's got its own place, a very unique place in sci-fi. Yeah, it's not really a horror movie. It's a sci-fi movie. And yeah, I mean, you know, the main, the main villain in the movie is basically a beach ball. You think I'm shitting you. If you haven't seen this movie, you think I'm kidding. I'm not kidding. The main villain is a beach ball. Go watch the movie. If you've somehow never seen this, it's also one of the most sampled movies of all time. I've done several videos on Meat Beat Manifesto. Jack Dangers of Meat Beat Manifesto sampled this movie many times. And I'm not going to tell you where. Go look it up yourself. This is part of the fun of entertainment, music, and film. You get to dig around and discover things on your own. And I don't think... When I heard the Meat Beat records that sampled this movie, I don't know that I'd seen Dark Star yet. I hadn't seen Dark Star until the early 90s. It had been a while. So, it'd been out for almost 20 years, actually, until I finally saw it. Really cool movie. It's really fun. This is one of those ultimate stoner movies. Like if you're under the influence of some substance, Dark Star will be the ultimate viewing experience. It's that kind of movie. But it's smart. It's very smart. It's very funny. Kind of tense, but it's more funny than anything else. And Dan O'Bannon's in the movie. He acts in the movie, so that's pretty cool. Anyway, this is John Carpenter's first movie he ever directed right here. Dark Star. I have it as my number 9. Where would you have it? Number 8. I know. I hear plenty of you saying, I can't believe you got this at number 8. Okay, fine. Go make your own list. Go make your own video. It is my number 8. I think Big Trouble in Little China is super fun. I remember seeing this movie in the theater with my brother, and we were laughing and having a great time. Does this movie always work? Absolutely not. This movie is a absolute mess, but it's one of those movies that Carpenter did where it works. It's one of the most glorious messes you might ever see. Kurt Russell is just doing an overt John Wayne imitation the entire time. The special effects are goofy. You get lightning rods coming out of characters' fingers and shit. But it just all of these disparate elements of this movie coming together, it shouldn't make sense. It shouldn't work, but it does. And I think it does because of John Carpenter's passion and Kurt Russell's acting. You also get Kim Cattrall, who's fantastic in this movie. They just look like they're having a great time. They're having a blast. And yeah, in some ways, there's nothing about Big Trouble in Little China that actually works. It's a complete disaster. But it's so entertaining and fun that you don't care. I mean, it's one of those movies where you're watching it for a few minutes and you're like, you end up kind of reminding yourself, like, this is so fucking stupid, but I am completely enthralled and entertained, so what does it matter? This is one of those movies. And I can remember at the time, this is one of those movies that got panned at the time. This is a theme with John Carpenter movies. Like very few of his movies were even liked, much less loved, but even liked in their day. His movies almost were universally panned at the moment of their release, and then as the decades went on, people started seeing them for the charm that they were. I mean, every one of his movies. I don't think there's a single exception. Not one single time was a John Carpenter movie welcomed with open arms from a film critic in their time. It's funny how his movies just kind of, they tend to garner more respect as the years go by. But I remember this movie getting panned at the time. People thought it was garbage. Yeah, see, it says 74% here on Rotten Tomatoes, but this includes more contemporary reviews. This movie was not well received at the time. People hated this movie. Those of us who like Carpenter, we enjoyed it. We thought it was fun. I think this came out in 1986, right? Yeah, 1986. Holy crap! And I remember reading this too. The studio hired Carpenter to direct the film and rushed Big Trouble in Little China in production so that it would be released before a similarly themed Eddie Murphy film, The Golden Child. Whew. Have you ever seen this movie? Holy crap. Terrible. This is when Eddie Murphy really, really started going down the shitter. There was a time where Eddie Murphy made great movies, but it hasn't been in a while. Anyway, Big Trouble in Little China. It's my number 8. Yeah. I know it's probably your favorite movie, but come on. Big Trouble in Little China, it's a mess. It's a glorious mess, but it's a mess nonetheless. Number 7, Starman, one of his non-horror movies. This is a great fucking movie. Is this underrated? I don't know. Maybe it is. I'm not sure if it is or not. I assume maybe that it is because it's not a horror movie. John Carpenter didn't do these types of movies very, very much, but this is a beautiful movie. I think Jeff Bridges is fantastic. I remember him getting nominated for Best Actor, and he absolutely deserved it. For some reason, it's showing this guy. What's this guy's name again? I can't remember this dude's name. I don't really care. I'm not a fan of him, but Jeff Bridges did get a nod for Best Actor, and he deserved it. And Karen Allen, who was also fantastic in this movie. This is a beautiful movie. Music is great. The acting's great. The concept of the movie is just an old school, alien comes to Earth, falls in love with a human. It's nothing that hasn't been done before. But Carpenter does it in a really original way. Music by Jack Nitzsche. I mean, one of the few moments that Carpenter didn't do music for one of his films. Beautiful score, awesome music. This is a great movie. I love this movie. Starman is a love story. It's happened. John Carpenter sums it up right there. This is John Carpenter making his love story, and he crushes it. Beautiful movie. I love this movie. I don't. There's never a bad time to stop and watch this film. It is a really gorgeous piece of work, and John Carpenter just really proves that he could do something other than horror. Yeah, 86%. It deserves it. I might even like it more than that. I think Starman, these next seven movies, these are the John Carpenter movies that I hold with very, very high esteem and regard, as you can probably tell. Everything that's come before this are movies that I like, or maybe just kind of like, or just straight up dislike. Now we're getting into the movies that I love. And Starman begins that list. So number 6, Halloween. I talked about Halloween, what was it, a couple weeks ago. I'm not going to get into this in deeper detail. You can go watch my video I just posted a few weeks ago if you're at all curious. But Halloween, I like this movie. I do think it is a genre buster. I do think it changed things. It is not my favorite Carpenter movie, but I do think it's great. And obviously, a lot of you guys are going to be watching this movie in the next week or so because of Halloween. Good for you. I love this movie. I'm not saying I don't like it. It's just my number 6 John Carpenter movie. That's all. Go watch my Halloween video if you want more information on that. All right, now we're getting into the heavyweights now, man. The top 5. I'm starting off the top 5 with They Live. What can I say about They Live that hasn't been said before? I saw this movie in the theater and I thought it was absolutely fantastic. When I was a kid, there was one reason why I loved this movie. Rowdy Roddy Piper. If you were a kid in the 80s, and maybe you're in the 10 to 20 range, which I was 15 in this year, okay? Chances are that you loved the WWF. You loved wrestling. And by the way, I want to recommend Netflix has a fantastic documentary about Vince McMahon that you should watch. It is beautiful. I loved every minute of it. Anybody who grew up in the 80s and loved wrestling, you knew Rowdy Roddy Piper. And as much as I loved wrestling back then, and I loved all the characters, I loved Hulk Hogan, I love Andre the Giant, I love Iron Sheik, Bobby the Brain Heenan, all of them. Rowdy Roddy Piper was the shit. He was the best. He was absolutely my favorite. He was an absolute riot. So fucking funny. The best. The glory days of WWF with that fabulous cast of Randy Macho Man Savage is in there. All of those guys. Roddy Piper was at the top for me. That's just me. But Roddy was the best. Just absolutely hilarious. The fact that Carpenter not only put him in his movie, but cast him as the lead was a revelation for me. I loved it. I still can remember sitting in the theater watching this movie, loving every fucking second of this movie. I love this movie. It only ages like fine wine, too. As I've gotten older and I've understood the themes better and I've experienced the themes as an adult, it only makes me love the movie even more. Keith David is also in it. The second time that Carpenter would pluck him out and put him in one of his movies. Keith David obviously he's going to be in my number 1 choice, and I just gave my number 1 choice away, but whatever. You guys probably see that one coming anyway. Keith David, great actor. Great. He and Rowdy Roddy Piper have great chemistry in this movie. Everything as much as there's so much about this movie that doesn't go right. I do think the movie has problems, but it's so fucking fun and so funny and so spooky and so interesting and intriguing all at once that you don't care that some of it doesn't really work. And it's got a classic ending. It's got such a good ending. it really illustrates John Carpenter's sense of humor. I think it has arguably the best ending of any Carpenter movie ever, with the exception of my number one choice, probably. But they live. Well, what can I say that hasn't been said about this movie? I've actually written papers on this movie. When I was in college, I wrote papers on this. So I have a lot to say about this movie. I could dissect this movie for hours, for days. I love this movie. This would be my number five. I mean, how much do we love this movie? My number four, The Fog. Now, in terms of movies that John Carpenter has done that have a lot of issues, but you just don't care, The Fog is at the top of that list. I think The Fog has issues. It definitely, it doesn't really, as traditional movies go, it doesn't always flow the way it should. I think it has some scenes of excess fat in there. There's a little bit of lard here and there. Again, it doesn't matter. This is the classic, hey kids, come sit down around the campfire and let me tell you a spooky story type of movie. Literally to the point where John Houseman is in the very beginning of the movie doing that with kids. They're literally sitting around a campfire. That's what's so fun about this movie. It's the campfire movie. It's the movie you sit around and you tell to your kids and freak them out with. And I also want to say, The Fog is legitimately creepy, I think. It's not about, I know I've talked about this before, but horror movies that move me are about the shit that you don't see. I think the freakiest part of this movie is when Adrienne Barbeau is up in the lighthouse and she's seeing the fog roll in and she's like on the radio begging for everybody to go run and hide, and the music is swelling. And by the way, great music by John Carpenter. That's freaky. I remember to this day as a kid watching this and just being on edge, like, what is it? What's in this fog? And she's panicked. She knows there's something there, and she's begging for people to flee. That's some scary shit, man. I watch The Fog to this day, and I feel dread. And I've seen the movie, I know what's going to happen, but I still feel dread. And that's why I love this movie so much. It takes me back to that point where I was a kid loving this movie. I get to be nostalgic about it, but it also does carry a hell of a lot more suspenseful weight than the 99.9% of any horror movie that comes out today. It just proves that you don't need CGI and a bunch of shitty, dumb effects and bad acting and music cues screaming in your face to make you jump. You don't need any of that shit. You just need a well drawn out story, and you need good acting and good directing, and boom, you're off and running. The Fog is a great movie. It is my number 4 on my John Carpenter list. Number 3, and in my opinion, the most underrated John Carpenter movie, Christine. I love this movie. My top 3 movies are the 3 John Carpenter movies that I feel are perfect. There's not a goddamn thing wrong with them. Now, when the source material's from Stephen King, obviously that's a plus. In my opinion, and I think I might do a list like this in the future about where I rank Stephen King stories that have been turned into films, Christine would be in my top 5, absolutely. And there's some great movies in that list, as you know. But this is a glorious movie, directed with absolute perfection and precision. The music is fantastic. The acting is stellar. Not a bad second in this movie. I absolutely love Christine. In fact, now that I'm looking at it right now, I think I'm going to go watch this. Maybe tonight. Definitely before Halloween at some point. This is a gorgeous piece of work. And anybody who thinks that this is one of John Carpenter's worst movies, I can't imagine that would be so, but man, I couldn't disagree with you more. This is a beautiful movie. There's not a damn thing wrong with it. I think Keith Gordon here is amazing. His performance, I think, in terms of a cocoon turning into a butterfly, I'm referring to his change. It's hard to play a character in a 100-minute movie, however long this is, 110 minutes, and have such a dynamic character arc. I think Keith Gordon does a great job with this. In the beginning, he's got the taped glasses and he's a complete dork and people are kicking him in the ass and he's getting bullied. And then for him to turn into what he becomes in the end, all because of this car, man, it's great. It's phenomenal acting. John Carpenter didn't, there's not a single piece of fluff in this movie. That's tough to do, man. And when you're dealing with a Stephen King story, it's you got to treat the material very carefully. I mean, King is an institution, as we know. You have to be careful with how you go forward with that. I think Carpenter absolutely nailed it. Christine, man, go watch it again. Not a bad thing about it. Perfect in every way. Christine, love you. All right. So again, you're going to already figure out what my number one is because I gave you a hint. And when you see my number two, you're obviously going to know what my number one is, and it won't be a surprise to anybody. But my number two, Escape from New York. I mean, what can I say? What can I possibly say about this movie that hasn't already been said before? I can give you my personal story with it. I did not see this movie in the theater. This movie came out, I want to say 1982, right? 81, yeah. I was like 8 years old when this movie came out, all right? So I was just too young to go see this movie, although my parents did take me to the theater to see some rated R movies. This was not one of them. This movie used to play on TV, though, unedited. This is a good quick a capsule view of how it was in the early mid 80s. You could see movies like this unedited on network television, on your local TV stations. There were commercials, but they would just play them. They wouldn't edit them. Maybe that was just here in the Portland, Oregon area. I don't know if that happened to other places in the country, but here in Portland, you could watch unedited movies like this with commercials. Here in Portland, there's a channel. It's Channel 12. It's KPTV. I assume they're still around. I don't watch normal TV, but back in the early mid 80s, Channel 12 would show unedited movies. Is anybody watching this from the Portland area remember this? Anyway, I saw Escape from New York on Channel 12 unedited, and man, to this day, it's such a fun. I mean, movies don't get any more fun than this. Soundtracks don't get any more fun than this. Acting doesn't get any more fun than this. Kurt Russell is just doing an out-and-out Clint Eastwood imitation. John Carpenter is completely just making his version of like a sci-fi Sergio Leone movie to the point where he throws Lee Van Cleef in there. I mean, this is a Western set in the future, and it's beautiful, man. This is a glorious movie. I don't need to tell you guys this. You already know this. Escape from New York is a perfect movie. There's nothing wrong with it. Nothing. It's funny. It's scary. The acting's great. Harry Dean Stanton is in it. Adrienne Barbeau and her boobs are in it. The music's fantastic. Isaac Hayes plays the Duke. Are you kidding me? When he pulls up in his caddy with the chandeliers on the hood. I mean, movies don't get any better than this. This is the epitome of a fun movie. And absolutely perfect in its way. And only topped by one film. And I've already done a video on this, and we know what John Carpenter's best movie is. It's The Thing. And I've already done a video on this, so I'm not going to get super deep into this, but The Thing is John Carpenter's best movie. Sometimes the mass population is just correct. It's rare when everybody thinks one thing and it's the truth. Usually, in my view, if everyone likes one thing, that usually means there's something wrong with that one thing. Not here. This is the one time where it's true. This is just the best movie John Carpenter's ever done. Written by Bill Lancaster, Burt Lancaster's son. He only ever wrote 2 screenplays, and I talked about this in my Thing video, but he did this, and he did The Bad News Bears. Talk about a fucking batting average, man. For your 2 movies to be The Bad News Bears and The Thing, holy crap, what an average. I mean, he didn't need to write anything else. Those are 2 of the finest movies ever made. So, man, everything just came together. Kurt Russell, Keith David again. Look at this all-star cast, man. You get Wilford Brimley. Come on. There's Keith David. Look, I mean, these two are enough right here. But then you get T.K. Carter was in it. Richard Dysart, Richard May. I mean, look at this cast. Come on. Wilford Brimley is amazing in this movie. I mean, one of the best. Diabetes. There he is. I mean, I've already done a movie on this. Or a movie. I've already done a video on this. I wish I did a movie. I've already done a video on the thing, so I'm not going to get too far into this, but my Lord. Talk about perfect movies. This is it. You can't, horror movies, it's impossible for them to get any better than this. Sometimes movies just, they come out at the right time and everything aligns and everyone came on board. You had John Carpenter, you had Kurt Russell, you had Keith David, you had Bill Lancaster, you had Rob Bottin. All those elements came together. It was 1982. AIDS had just become a thing. The Thing kind of tied in terms of how I see it. And go watch my Thing video if you want more on this. But The Thing came out at a time, obviously The Thing is about this thing that we don't understand. Well, AIDS was a thing at that time in our history that no one understood. So it was a really frightening movie. People didn't want to deal with this movie dealing about this plague that was wiping people out that they didn't understand because that was happening in real life. It was hard for people to accept. People did not like this movie when it came out. You youngins out there, picture this. You guys who have grown up with The Thing and knowing that The Thing is a great movie. People did not love this movie when it came out. It took a long time, a couple of decades really, for people to really start coming around to this movie. Now, I am proud to say that I am a kid who saw this movie in the theater and loved it from day one. I'm proud to say that because people didn't love this movie. It was a lot to handle. I think I just, again, like the movie itself, I think I timed it well in terms of when I saw it, in terms of when it was released into my history. I lucked out. And we are all lucking out for having this movie in our consciousness, in our lexicon. We have The Thing, one of the great movies of all time. John Carpenter at his absolute best. That is my ranking of John Carpenter movies. We have The Thing at number 1, Escape from New York at number 2, Christine, Fog, They Live, Halloween, Starman, Big Trouble, Dark Star, Assault on Precinct 13. Those are my top 10. 11, 12. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but whatever. I don't care. And yeah, starting here is when I kind of start losing a little bit. I do like these three. They are enjoyable, but meh. And then these movies I just kind of flat out don't like. I try to respect them because they are made by this man right here, and I love John Carpenter. And I do wish he would make another movie. I feel like the social climate has changed too much for Carpenter to make a movie like he would make it. You know, his movies were just he's an old school filmmaker now. You know, I think his movies would be too littered with political incorrectness, you know. It doesn't take much to offend the wrong people now when it comes to film. You know, film has never been more washed up and boring. And I can't help but think that John Carpenter doesn't want to play a part in that. Maybe I'm wrong. Probably easier for him to just go on tour and make his music with his kids. I'm sure he'd probably rather do that anyway. But God, it would be great to have one more movie from John Carpenter. Just one more. I've heard him talk about he wanted to make Dead Space into a movie, which is a great video game series. That would be cool, but until we see that, who knows? That is my ranking of John Carpenter. I hope you enjoyed it. Happy Halloween and all that stuff, and I'll talk to you next time. Later.